Hello everyone. Today I want to talk about a simplified version of Adoga. And for those who don't know, Adoga is my own personal growth method that I developed and wrote a book about. This simplified version of Adoga is going to rely on 3 tools or practices. And those are relax, feel, and imagine. So I'm going to walk through each of these 3 practices and explain how to perform them as well as the purpose behind each one. Relaxation, I think, is fundamental to all other practices because relaxation is essentially how we can stop doing unnecessary or harmful things. So if you are, for example, in an anxious state or a depressed state or an angry state and there are thoughts and emotions that are happening that are not useful or helpful, then all of that requires energy, and by relaxing, you bring yourself back to a sort of baseline. There's another reason why I emphasize relaxation, and that's to deal with repression. So repression is this really important idea in psychology that says that we can push down or not pay attention to feelings or thoughts because they're uncomfortable, because they're painful, because we don't like them. Repression is a really fundamental problem because it limits our awareness, and we can't address problems that we don't know exist. And all of these repressions, or sometimes I'll call them resistances, require effort. You sort of have to tense in some kind of an internal way to push down emotions and thoughts. And so by relaxing, you sort of counteract that repression. So you can imagine that there's an emotion that's trying to come to you, and you might be actually pushing it away. And you may not even be aware that you're doing this. It could be subconscious or something that you're just used to doing. And so it takes effort to push this emotion away, and by relaxing, you remove the resistance and then you begin to feel the emotion. So this is really the first step of the Adoga method, is to just relax. And you can start by relaxing physically. You can relax muscles and tensions that you feel in your body, but you ultimately want to get to sort of an emotional and mental level. So relaxing your mind so that less thinking is happening, relaxing your emotions so if there's any kind of an internal tension or resistance, that's winding down into a calmness. Now, as you're relaxing, you may start to feel uncomfortable or painful things as those resistances get released. And that may not actually feel very relaxing, but that's still what we want to have happen. So that is doing it right. Okay, so the second tool is feeling. And this is essentially just taking it a step farther. We've already started to come into contact with maybe new feelings and emotions through the relaxation process. Now we're actually actively intending to feel all that there is to feel in our emotional space. So again, this is going to be an antidote to repression, but now we're really taking our awareness to the next level, and we're adding a little bit more activity, a little bit more intention. So relaxation is totally unfocused, no intention. Now in feeling, we actually are subtly, actively pushing toward feeling more. So it's almost like a very subtle strain towards opening up even more. Now, the feeling practice can actually be really healing just because emotions want to be listened to. So this is almost like if you have ever been in a relationship and there was something that you wanted to say and you felt like the other person just wasn't really hearing you. You just have a very deep desire to be listened to or to be seen. So emotions can almost have a personality like that of their own. When you repress them, they feel sort of unseen and unheard. And just by listening to them, intending to feel them, they may actually just calm down because of that alone. It's really important to keep in mind in this feeling practice that feeling does not mean believing, and it doesn't mean approving of. So you may have an emotion or a thought that you disagree with. Maybe you think it's untrue. Maybe you feel like you're a failure, but mentally you're like, no, I'm not a failure. So if you were to do the feeling practice with a thought or an emotion like that, then you don't have to admit to being a failure. You're simply opening up to the feeling, opening up to the actual sensations of it, and becoming completely aware of what is there in your psyche, in your body, in your emotions. You're becoming aware of it, but you don't have to necessarily buy into it. So that's a really important distinction. Okay, the last tool is imagination, and this is where we get to actually actively intend or create emotional states that we want. So you'll find that if you imagine being peaceful, if you imagine being excited, if you imagine being loving or powerful or inspired, then those emotions tend to actually become a reality just simply through imagining them. So this is a really powerful tool for just cultivating more positive feelings and energy, and also just for exploring different possibilities, like what would it look like if I led my life with a feeling of excitement or with a feeling of peace and calm and equanimity. So now we get to the really important part of Adoga, which I call alignment. So alignment means that each of the 3 practices does a particularly good job at addressing a certain category of emotions. So we can actually respond to a certain emotion with a particularly well-suited practice. So in very simple terms, you can think of relaxation as the ideal response to tiredness, feeling as the ideal response to sadness, and imagination as the ideal response to fear or anger. Now, each of those labels really represents a category of emotions. So, for example, when I'm saying sadness, I would also include emotions like depression, grief, hopelessness, shame, guilt, despair. And when I'm saying fear and anger, that would also include emotions like nervousness, anxiety, frustration, rage, and so on. Tiredness is perhaps slightly more straightforward, but I would also include perhaps experiences of like overwhelm or confusion. Relaxation is also a good response in those situations. So we're basically painting a spectrum here from more low energy or tired experiences up to more energetic and excited experiences. So to practice alignment method, as I call it, you would sit down and pay attention to your inner space and your emotions, and you would watch to see where you are on this spectrum. Are you closer to tiredness, closer to sadness, or closer to fear or anger? And as you notice those states coming up, you respond with the corresponding practice. So if you notice tiredness, you would move towards relaxation. If you notice sadness, then you would move more towards feeling. And if you notice any sort of fear, nervousness, or anger, then you would move towards imagination. One last quick note about imagination. I would say generally go for imagining a positive emotion that you would like to experience. However, there are also a lot of variations on the imagination practice that can work well too. So you might try just clearing the imagination. You could actually alternate between imagining something you do want and something that you don't want. Sometimes just focusing on a single simple imagination is enough to stop your imagination from doing something unhelpful and refocus it. So I just wanted to mention these additional possibilities. I hope this video helps to get you started with the Adoga practice, and I hope this will pique your curiosity to get further into it, because there's definitely a lot more that you can do with Adoga. This can become more complex because we can add more practices and we can also add more categories of emotions. But just starting out with these simple 3 of relaxation, feeling, and imagining, and how they line up with tiredness, sadness, and fear/anger, I think is a really great way to get started. So goodbye for now, and I'll see you in the next video on the Project Auto YouTube channel.